Okay, so this is basically kind of a summation of all the exercises we went over. Now, we didn't show all the videos or the exercises and videos for this session. If you do want to teach your dog with loose leash walking, let us know. We're happy to come by your house and go through them individually like we did with Levin's Guardians. All right, now all of these require what we call leveling up. Really, for this activity, what we want you to do for 4 weeks is practice 3 times a day in 5-minute practice sessions, each practice session. So essentially, you're practicing 15 minutes a day. Now, we want them not all together. So really, once in the morning, once midday, once in the evening. Now, if you have time to practice more than 3 times a day, that's great, provided your dog likes it and is doing well. Some dogs get a little frustrated. They can only practice 3 times a day. If that's the case, I don't want to practice more times and have the dog not like the exercise. So as long as it's positive, the dog enjoys it, which most dogs do, shouldn't be a problem. But at least 3 times a day, every single day for the 4 weeks. The reason this program works is we're kind of breaking down the individual steps of each of loose leash walking, helping the dog practice whatever that particular step is, and then go to the next step, and then we can start combining them. So the first one was a silky leash, which is where we have a dog on a leash, and I'm going to put a little pressure on the leash and wait for him to give into the pressure. Now, when I'm doing this, don't move your feet when you're walking around. So you're settled, the dog's settled, sitting down. And now that I think about this, I'm going to put a quick leash on you. And so I can, some of these things I probably will want to demonstrate. A little bit easier if you're all set up. All right, so for silky leash and all these exercises that require a clicker, I like to have the clicker and my leash in one hand. So for silky leash, I put a little pressure. And I'm not rocking, I'm just waiting. As soon as he gives in, and it can be a lean, a step, anything. As soon as he gives in, then I click and give him the treat. All right, so that's the silky leash. So you want to do this usually about 2 to 3 days. You want to get to the point where and don't start putting the pressure on if he's walking. So he's going to be stationary. There you go. And then I put the pressure on, he's not putting the pressure on. So when I do that 4 out of 5 times in a row, and he gives in right away, then I practice a couple times successfully. Then I'm going to go practice that on the deck. When he can do 4 out of 5 times successfully there, practice a little bit more so you have some good positive practice. Then do it in the yard, 4 out of 5 times there, do it in the front yard. And then you can do it 4 out of 5 times in the street if you need to have that extra one. So usually this is about 2 to 3 days, and then you're ready to start doing the bowl game. Now the bowl game is where we have the bowl on either side of the room. You drop a treat in the bowl here if you're by yourself. Just make sure, and I usually like to have the dog sit, then I drop the treat in the bowl, and then I start walking towards the other bowl. So that bowl is preloaded if you're by yourself. If you have somebody else and they can drop the treat in the bowl for you, that's great. So remember this one, you're gonna walk, and as soon as you think you anticipate he's going to pull, or he starts to pull, you stop, don't rock the leash, just hold still, and as soon as he takes the tension off the leash, you don't click, you start walking again towards the bowl. For this exercise, the bowl pressure game, the only way he gets the treat is when he reaches the bowl. Now, when we say a marker word, we should say that and follow it up with a treat or a reward. So if he stops, if he pulls and we stop, and then he takes the tension off the leash, we don't mark that. We're just gonna move forward. So basically what the lesson is for him is when I start pulling, we stop. As soon as I take the tension off the leash, we go. And that's why the silky leash exercise we did before this teaches him that releasing the pressure is a good rewardable thing, makes it usually easier to do this. So the same thing for this exercise. When you get to the point, well, actually a couple of things. So as you're doing this, as we saw, he was walking and taking multiple steps with us. And then, and that's what we're really looking for, is him kind of checking in with us and not putting any pressure on. Now, the time that dogs are usually going to put the pressure, start pulling, is when they get the last, like about 5 to 7 feet to the leash. Now, if he pulls really strong, make sure you're wearing shoes. And if you keep your hand and push your hand against your sternum, that way when he pulls, you're pushing this way. It makes you a little bit stronger. So again, 4 out of 5 times in the house, and do this in different parts of the house, a bowl on each side. Your hallway is a great place to do this, but do it at different angles as well. Then go practice, put a bowl over there by your, outdoor patio deck, walking all the way here, and you're walking on the cement. Cement instead of grass, because grass makes it a little bit more distracting. 4 out of 5 times there, then do it in your backyard, and then 4 out of 5 times there, do it in your front yard. Now, when you move to your front yard for all these exercises, don't do it when the kids are riding their bikes or there's things that are going on that are too distracting. That might be something you practice up to, but not initially. Okay, so that's the leash pressure bowl game. The third one that we did was the walk back game. And there's a video for that one above, so I'm not going to go through too much, but that one does take a little bit of rhythm. A couple of tips for that one: make sure that when you drop the first one, my hand is here, and I'm clicking for him walking towards the treat, not getting the treat. And at first, you're gonna have to put him down pretty quickly, but as you saw, after you started to figure this out, you're able to put him at a little bit more relaxed pace. And you want to really have it, when I'm putting the treat, I want to be at halfway distance between me and him. Put the treat down, and you're clicking right before he gets that treat. So that's the walk back game. Again, your hallway is a great way to initially do that one because there's not a lot of room for him to go to the side. And for all these exercises, remember to use your environment. So if I'm doing the walk back game, and let's say the wall is right here, and he comes this way when I want him over here, I could walk here against the wall to prevent him from going around. So kind of shade toward a side if you're doing an orientation game like the walk back game, so that he goes to the right place and doesn't get out of position. Okay, so for the walk back game, again, you're gonna spend about a week on that one. You wanna get to the point where you can probably take 2 or 3 steps back before you have to drop the next treat. He's walking a straight line, very casual, and he's not trying to go either side of you. Once you can do that 4 out of 5 times in a row in the house, practice a little bit at the good standard, then go out and practice outside of your deck, same area. Practicing your your lawn after you get 4 out of 5 times on the deck, 4 out of 5 times the lawn. But again, each time practice a little bit with him doing it properly. Then do it in your front yard, again, without a lot of distraction, then maybe in the street. So that's the walk back game. Then eventually you're gonna do the walk back game with the pivot. And so since we want him on our left side, I'm doing a walk back, whoops. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do one there. And I'll show you the pivot. And then I'm gonna turn to my right. And I want to drop the treat really by my heel as I'm walking forward. Now that one becomes a little bit easier after because we spent a week walking backwards. He's kind of used to walking with us. And so you walk back a couple of times to start off, then you do your pivot and you're both walking the same direction. Eventually you can just do it without having to walk back and do the pivot. So that's the walk back pivot game. Hey buddy. The next one is the stutter game, and I'll show you this one without a treat. So this is the great one that you want. This is the meat and potatoes of the exercise. So anytime he gets out of position, comes back, I wait for him to reach me, then I take 1 step forward, then I click and give a treat. Eventually I do this and move backwards suddenly. That is what will get him to come towards you. I know it's a lot. So, hey buddy, love it. So then eventually you're taking 1, 2 steps before I click and then give him that treat after the stutter. Now when you're doing the stutter again, move back quickly. See how he oriented? When he reaches me, come forward, take 1 step, click and give him a treat. And then you go back to 1 step, click, treat, 1 step, click, treat. I guess I skipped a step. That's the step that you would do before you do the stutter game. Is just having it show me I have a treat. 1 step, click for walking that step. 1 step, click, and give him a treat. And eventually you're taking 2 steps before you click, 3 steps before you click. Now this one, I have the clicker in my left hand, 11. Come here, buddy. So I want to be able to for this one, you probably would have the leash and the clicker in your right hand since you want to walk on your left side. We first started doing this when we had the treat here. He was doing this. But remember, eventually what we want to do, come here, 11, is if I'm holding the treats here, I'm going to hold my hand up here, but I really like to have my treat pouch here, so I'm walking right here, take a step, click. That's kind of the motion you want to use. So once you get to that one, you can do 4 out of 5 times in the house, going 1 step at a time, then go to 2 steps at a time, 3 steps at a time. Eventually we get to about 3 to 4 steps in a row. That's when we want to start, okay, go ahead, buddy. That's when we want to start, then you can level up and go to your back deck. But when you go to your back deck, let's say you're at 5 steps with him walking next to you before you click. When you go out in your back deck, go back to 1 step, click, treat. 1 step, 11, come here, buddy. Quick treat. The idea is when we go to the environment that's a little bit more distracting, we make the exercise easier because now we're adding an action element. But eventually we want to get to the point where you can walk about 5 steps on your deck and he's walking next to you. And this is the exercise, remember, you can start off doing without a leash, but I do want to get back to doing it with the leash because that's what we're going to need to have when we're on a walk and we want him to get used to that. So once you do that, then you can do the stutter game that I explained out of order. The last one that you're going to do is the rhythm game. It's a pattern game. Come here, buddy. So no leash. Now I would have a leash for this one, but we're going to do it without. 11. 1, 2, 3, click. 1, 2, 3, click. So you're taking 1, 2, 3 steps, clicking on 3, and then holding the treat off to your side. Make sure you hold the treat at your side on the seam of your pants or slightly behind you so he's not going in front of you. Now, if he's racing ahead of you, it means we probably need to go back to the stutter game. And the stutter game you can use at any point. If the dog moves in front of you, do that stutter, and when he reorientates towards you, then you take it 1 step forward, click with him in position and go. So that stutter game, like I said, is the meat and potatoes. The pattern game, at first it's 1, 2, 3, click, treat, 1, 2, 3, click, treat. Eventually it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, click and treat. You can pick out whatever number you want. I usually like to do it. I like 3, 6, 9, 12. And eventually you're up to the point where he's taking like 16 steps, checking in with you every couple of steps. And then you're giving him whatever that number is, 16, and then holding the treat off to your side. So the pattern game, the 1, 2, 3 game, is a great game to do around distractions because he's getting the treats more frequently. Now, if that's the case, and I'm up to 16 paces, and now there's a distraction, I might go back to 1, 2, 3, click, 1, 2, 3, click. So he's checking with you right away. Now, the Guardian mentioned when we first started doing this, he was amazed at how well 11 was checking in with him. 11, come here. Let's try to do this one more. Let's demonstrate this part. So if I'm walking with him, let's say he's on a leash. Every time he checks in with me, I can either click or I can say yes. So this is something you wouldn't want to do while you're on, when you're doing the individual exercises, you focus on what you're working on. But you're on the walk, anytime he looks up at you, say yes and hold the treat up. Hold the treat again behind the seam of your pants. So you're 11. Here. Puppy. So when he's coming, I'm giving him the treat so he's in the right position. The last little one that I'm going to show you is something it's really a way of calling your dog in position. So it's easier if you're in front of anybody. So I'm going to move my left leg and my left arm back simultaneously. 11. So this is to get him in position. I turn him towards my butt. As soon as he's here, I click, then I turn, and release the treat. Then I do, whoops. I like this one because you can rep it back and forth. So arm and leg move. This one doesn't move. He gets in position, click, turn to face him, arm and leg back, turn in position, click, and give him the treat. And eventually you can put him into a sit with this one. And let's get you over here. You have to have better camera presence, buddy. So lure him back, bring him here, raise it up, and you put him in that sit. Now, when I'm doing this is something you rep back and forth. It's a real easy exercise. Do it in your house when he's comfortable doing it. And when you're doing it, a lot of people are kind of like, or they move their arm and then their leg. So it's really when you move your arm and leg back, turn him towards your butt, then flip your hand over and he comes over here, hand is behind their seam, click, or say yes, release that treat, turn and face him and do it again. Eventually you want to go like 11. So eventually you can have this big position. But at first it's you're luring him over with the treat just like I showed you. Then after a while you start luring it with your hand higher, and eventually it's this arc, you're slapping your butt, and your dog runs over, sits down next to you. Then you can start, let's go. Now one last little tip before I forgot is turns. So remember, if we're going to do a turn, we're going to execute the turn first and then give him the treat. So I'm going to take a couple steps and take a right. So I'm going to take 1, click, treat, 1, 2, right. So I say right, then I turn right. I take 1 step. When he takes 1 step after he's turned right, that's when I click and give him the treat. Same thing if I'm going to turn left. Here, buddy. So if I'm going to turn left, left, and then give him that treat. And then I like to have a turn, and right there you saw I was holding the treat out. When you're doing directional training, it's nothing wrong with going right and holding that out so he kind of follows your hand along. After you've done it enough though, you should say right and just take the right and he kind of follows along with you. All right, 11. Now this is an easy way to teach your dog loose leash walking. Now your dog sit can go off and sniff things. That's the beauty of loose leash walking. They're not walking a perfect heel. They're allowed to sniff. Now, I like to say, let's go every time we start walking. Let's go. So that becomes kind of your cue that we're on the move. Now, if he's sniffing, I like to let dogs sniff whenever possible, but if he sniffed long enough, again, I like to let him sniff, but I want to get him to go. I can say, hey, 11, let's go. And if every time I leave the house or exit the car or go in the backyard and I say, let's go as he starts moving, that becomes a cue to move on to the next adventure. So when you're doing these things, eventually it's a 4-week program. So don't move to the don't level up. Don't go from inside to outside unless you can do 4 out of 5 times in a row. Same thing, going to the next level, the next level. And then once you do that, then you go to the next exercise. Once you've got all the exercise, like the pivot walk back, you can incorporate that at different times. And you saw right there, I kind of used that hand motion thing. Walking back, he's orientating towards me. Take 1 step with him here, clicking him a treat. So the idea for this is since you're doing it very gradually and progressively and practicing one thing for 3 to 5 or 7 days, he gets in the habit of doing it, then the next exercise kind of builds on top of it. So if he has any struggles, back up. The goal is not to get through the exercise fast. The goal is for him to learn the activity so that he does it, whatever it is that you want him to do. But you see right here, all his parents, his favorite people are behind the camera, and he's been running over him because I've been giving him all these treats. He's kind of in a residual. Sit. He's like, we didn't practice this. But eventually you'll just find that he's kind of gravitating, kind of walking to you on your side. So make sure he does that. Click or say your marker word and give him a treat. All right, 11, let's sign off. Come here, buddy. This is my buddy 11. Such a handsome puppy. And these are some tips you can use on how you can teach your dog to walk with a loose leash. Yeah. Thank you, buddy.